Amid a wedding overflowing with light and laughter, he sat there, alone in his quiet wheelchair, like a mournful melody lost among a symphony of joy. No one approached him. No one dared to invite him to dance. Until, a little boy shouted, "Mom, that man's chair is so cool." And the young mother, with a heart scarred but never stripped of hope, stepped toward him, reached out her hand and asked, "Would you like to be my dance partner?" Gleaming light spilled from crystal chandeliers dancing along with the waltz that echoed through the grand ballroom. White dresses swirled like petals sparkling among the elegant black suits. The scene felt woven from a sweet dream, every detail flawless. From the shimmering ruby wine in its glass to the soft laughter drifting across the air. But in one corner of that perfect picture, where the light did not quite reach, there was an unusual silence. A VIP table reserved for one man only. His name was Liam Whitaker, a name that once made corporations in both New York and London tread carefully. A financial prodigy, the youngest CEO ever to grace the cover of Forbes. Once upon a time, wherever Liam went, the world seemed to orbit around him. But now, he was simply a man in a flawless tuxedo black tie, polished to perfection, sitting upright in a cold chrome wheelchair. His storm gray eyes scanned the room, like someone on the outside looking in at a world he once belonged to. He had once been an accomplished horseman, the man every magazine clamored to feature. Then tragedy struck like a sudden storm 2 years ago. One moment, one crash, and his life veered onto a road with no way back. His legs lost all feeling. Doctors said he might never stand again. And right after that sentence, his fiancée, Olivia, stood up and walked out of his life, carrying away the future they had once painted together. Liam could no longer recall the last time someone had sat beside him at a party. Friends had drifted away like shadows swept by the wind. Business partners remained polite, but always distant. And tonight, at this lavish wedding, where people gathered to celebrate love, Liam once again sat in silence, his champagne glass untouched. "That's why I came here," he thought, lips pressed into a wry line. "To remind myself of what I've lost." The music shifted to a sweeter tune. Couples took turns leading each other onto the dance floor. Even the silver-haired uncle smiled as he offered his hand to his wife of 40 years. Liam closed his eyes as if hoping to fade into the darkness behind him. And then, another sound brushed past his ear. Not the measured chuckles of the upper class, but a genuine laugh, bright and clear, like someone who'd spilled ice cream on her dress, yet couldn't help but giggle. Liam opened his eyes. At the farthest table near the doors, a boy had draped a napkin over his head like a superhero's cape. His mother, a young woman in a simple blue dress, tried to coax him into sitting still, but she too burst out laughing at his silly little game. That smile, unpolished, uncalculated, warmed Liam in a way he hadn't felt in years, like a small candle lit in a cold, dark room. He didn't realize how long he'd been staring. She wasn't dazzling like Olivia, nor painted in bold makeup. Yet something in her eyes and her laughter made the entire world around Liam pause. The boy suddenly pointed toward him and exclaimed, "Mom, that man's chair is awesome." The whole ballroom turned their heads. Liam froze. Once such words would have cut into him like a knife. But this time, those innocent eyes held only admiration, not pity. The young mother blushed, whispered something to hush her son, then laughed softly, only to accidentally meet Liam's gaze. In that moment, for the first time in years, Liam felt seen. Not as a crippled billionaire, but simply as a man. At the corner of the room, Sophie Allen drew in a deep breath. She told herself, "Calm down, Sophie. You're just here to congratulate, have a slice of cake and leave." Her table might as well have been galaxies away from the stage. This was the wedding of Emily, an old college friend, once the girl who borrowed Sophie's poetry notebook, now a radiant bride. Meanwhile, Sophie was 29, a single mother juggling 2 jobs to support her son. She glanced around. The tables near the stage brimmed with glittering gowns and polished smiles. Her own table, pressed into a corner, was a quiet reminder that some people are always placed on the sidelines. "Mommy," her 6-year-old son, Leo, exclaimed, "that piano is as big as Santa's house." Sophie chuckled. "Yes, but you need to sit still. We're guests, not the main characters. But I can be a secret superhero. I'll protect the bride from the bad guys." "What bad guys?" Sophie arched a brow. the ones who won't let her eat the wedding cake. Leo declared seriously, nearly making Sophie choke on her orange juice. That was what people loved about Sophie. Even when life hurled Bill's night shifts and judgment her way, she still carried a spark of innocence and wit, as though her heart had never been broken. While Sophie's thoughts wandered to next month's electricity bill, Leo suddenly stopped eating his ice cream and pointed, "Sto stoisek, tabaut moizixir." "Mommy, that chair is amazing." She followed his gaze and saw Liam framed by chandeliers, sitting alone. The black tuxedo stretched over his broad shoulders, his neatly kept hair glowing under the golden light. But his eyes, like a bleak winter sky, rested on no one. Sophie stilled, not out of pity, out of recognition. She knew what it felt like to stand at the edge of life's celebrations. At her own graduation, she had stood alone 8 months pregnant, watching others embrace and cheer. Leo tilted his head. "Why isn't anyone sitting with him, Mommy?" "Maybe people think it's not convenient," Sophie murmured. "Not convenient, but he has the coolest chair here. I want to try it." Sophie laughed, though her heart trembled. The man's eyes lingered in her mind, and for the first time that night, she realized she wasn't the only one who felt alone at this party. The music shifted into an energetic swing, pulling feet onto the dance floor. The entire ballroom came alive. Applause, laughter, the clicking of heels on polished wood, all beating like the heart of a night overflowing with joy. Yet, at two far ends of the room, 2 tables, one in the VIP section, the other near the door, remained steeped in silence. Liam Whitaker leaned back slightly, eyes half closed, as though trying to vanish from the noisy room around him. Not far away, Sophie Allen kept quietly glancing in his direction. Inside her, something was beginning to stir. Not sympathy, but a rhythm in sync with his own. She saw it clearly. No one else in that ballroom truly saw him, except her, and Leo. Mommy, Leo whispered, his eyes fixed on Liam. "I think he needs a dance partner." Sophie froze. She let out a soft laugh, brushing her son's hair. Sweetheart, how could he possibly dance?" Leo frowned, his voice firm. "Dancing doesn't need legs. You just need someone who wants to dance with you." That simple childlike truth pierced Sophie's heart like a gentle knock on a long locked door inside her. She turned to look at Liam again. He sat unmoving, a stone amid an ocean of festivity. But in that moment, Sophie didn't see a disabled man. She saw someone left behind, just as she once had been. A thought flashed through her mind, reckless, a little foolish, but wholly Sophie Allen. She sipped her wine, warmth rising to her cheeks, then looked down at her son, who was still playing with the napkin like it was a superhero cape. Leo tilted his head, eyes shining. "Mommy, if you talk to him, I bet he'll smile." Sophie pressed her lips together, tightening her grip on the glass. "Don't be stupid, Sophie," a voice scolded inside her. "Who is he? A stranger? A billionaire? A man in a wheelchair?" But then another voice, softer yet stronger, rose within her. "So, what a smile costs nothing. And sometimes, it saves someone." She looked at Leo, then back at Liam, and she knew. Fate had just placed a small turning point in front of her, and this time, she wasn't going to walk away. Under the soft lights, Sophie rose from her chair. Without a word, without overthinking, she walked straight through the rows of tables, every curious gaze beginning to follow her. The click of her heels on the wooden floor echoed like the pounding of her own heart, each step whispering in her mind, "What on earth are you doing, Sophie?" Liam noticed her approach. His brow arched, his thoughts instantly jumping to familiar scenarios. Someone coming to offer help, or worse, to look at him with pity. But Sophie stopped right in front of him, bent slightly, and smiled. Her brown eyes sparkled with mischief. No pity, no fear, only a silent invitation. And in a voice both gentle and confident, she asked, "Would you like to be my dance partner tonight?" The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Liam froze. He thought he'd misheard. A young woman, a complete stranger, was asking him. The man everyone else only dared to glance at from afar. To be her partner. He searched her eyes, hunting for any trace of pity. But all he found was light. "You're joking, right?" he muttered, his voice hoarse. Sophie tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Maybe, but if you say no, you'll ruin the best entrance I've made all evening." A beat of silence passed, and then the unthinkable happened. Liam laughed. Not loud, not carefree, but real. Genuine enough to surprise even himself. The ballroom buzzed. Murmurs rippled like waves. Why would she do that? Did he just laugh? Oh my God, she really asked him to dance. Liam set his champagne down. His hand pressed lightly against the table's edge as a sudden decision surged through him. He looked up, lips curving faintly. All right then, miss. Sophie, she said quickly, her smile radiant. Sophie Allen. He hesitated briefly, then inclined his head. Liam Whitaker. A fresh stir of whispers swept through nearby tables, the weight of his name still heavy. Yet, in his voice, it wasn't boastful. It was simply a fact. And tonight he added, lips quirking slightly. You're my partner. Without another pause, Sophie gently placed her hand on the armrest of his chair, not to push, but to walk beside him. Shall we begin? She asked. The murmurs erupted into astonishment. All eyes followed, as the girl from the farthest table led the man out of the shadows and into the light. Straight to the dance floor, where music still soared, where golden lights bathed their every step in magic. Liam let Sophie guide him. His heart beat differently now. Not because of the wheels turning beneath him, but because for the first time in months, he didn't feel alone. Under the sparkling chandeliers, he caught Sophie's gaze, warm and bright as early spring sunlight. A ray of light slipped into the darkest corners within him. Perhaps tonight would be unlike any other night. The music swelled, wrapping the room, as though the very sound itself was spinning in rhythm with the dancer's steps. Beneath the honey-gold glow of the lights, every gaze turned toward the most unlikely pair of the evening, a man in a wheelchair and a woman with tumbling brown hair wheeling him onto the dance floor with a radiant smile as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sophie moved without hesitation. She didn't bow her head. She didn't wait for anyone's approval. She simply held onto the armrest of Liam's chair and guided him into the center of the light as if he were still the prince stepping out of a fairy tale ball. Only this time, wheels replaced the horse. Ready, Mr. Whitaker, she whispered just loud enough for him to hear. Liam arched a brow, his eyes glinting with familiar sarcasm. Ready to be stared at like an animal in a glass cage. Sophie chuckled, her eyes sparkling. No. Ready to become the star of the dance floor. Liam shook his head lightly, powerless against her daring sweetness. He didn't know why he allowed her to pull him out before hundreds of watching eyes. But one thing he knew for certain, it had been far, far too long since his heart had raced like this. Then unexpectedly, Sophie spun his chair with the grace of a practiced dancer. Her simple blue dress lifted gently with the motion, her hair catching the light like strands of soft caramel. The entire hall gasped. Liam clutched the armrest, slightly alarmed. Are you trying to turn me into a race car? Sophie laughed, unbothered, not slowing down. No, I'm turning you into my dance partner. And this chair, she winked, is the secret partner making you the brightest dancer in the room. She twirled him, pushed forward, pulled back. It wasn't just movement, it was a declaration. He wasn't merely the man in the wheelchair anymore. He was part of the dance. He was alive, present, and cherished. The atmosphere shifted. Children giggled. Adults, after a stunned pause, began clapping along with the rhythm. Hesitation, pity, doubt, all dissolved like mist. Sophie leaned close to his ear, her breath warm against his skin. See, you can dance. You just needed the right partner. Their eyes met. And for the first time in 2 years, a spark cut through the ice inside Liam's chest. A warmth both strange and achingly real. Then, a high, clear voice rang out like a silver bell. Mommy, I want to dance too. Leo, in his tiny suit napkin tied around his neck like a superhero's cape, charged straight onto the dance floor. Mister, let me dance with you too. Liam laughed, truly laughed, his chest shaking with the sound. And what exactly am I supposed to do, kiddo? Leo answered with dead seriousness. Easy. I'll be your engine. The boy climbed onto the back of the chair, gripping the handles, as if steering an invisible race car. The entire hall erupted in laughter. Sophie pretended to sigh, though her eyes glistened with joy. All right, gentlemen, let's show the world a performance. And so, beneath the dazzling chandeliers, 3 souls. A man who once believed his life had ended, a woman who once thought she was just a single mother, and a little boy with a superhero's heart, turned the dance floor into their stage. Sophie spun the chair. Leo shouted, "Vroom, vroom," like he was piloting a spaceship, and Liam, he laughed. He couldn't stop. Applause thundered. The whispers of pity vanished. In their place came admiration. Liam turned the crystal light glinting in his storm-gray eyes, making them shimmer like a lake after a rain. His throat tightened, but at last, words long buried broke free deep and trembling like the sound of a cello. "Thank you," he said, breath tinged with wine and raw emotion. "It's been so long since I last felt alive." Sophie tilted her head, her brown hair brushing his shoulder, her smile soft as moonlight soothing away darkness. "You're not just alive, Liam," she whispered, her eyes glowing like freshly lit candles. "You're shining, and everyone in this room can see it." In that moment, applause whispers even the soaring music, all faded as though drowned beneath glass. The world blurred, leaving only the two of them wrapped in a warm circle strong enough to shield them both from the shadows of the past. And in that quickened heartbeat, Liam knew, not maybe but with certainty, his life was beginning again, right here, right now. Crystal lights still danced across the gilded walls, but for Liam, everything else blurred away. Not because his eyesight faltered, but because his heart was locked on the two most extraordinary people of the night. A woman named Sophie Allen, and a 6-year-old boy who had filled the entire ballroom with laughter, using nothing more than a napkin and a single bold line, "I'll be your engine." The music shifted, slowing into something gentler, as if making space for tenderness. Couples began stepping off the dance floor, leaving a circle of open space where the three of them remained, or, rather, where they still held the center. Liam had never thought he'd be the center of anything again, outside of board meetings or finance headlines. Yet here he was being applauded for something as simple as a laugh. A true laugh, not guarded, not calculated, not staged. Sophie crouched beside Leo, resting her hand on his small shoulder. "Superhero, do you want to go play in the garden?" The boy nodded eagerly, clutching the cupcake handed to him earlier by a kind waiter as a reward for an outstanding performance. His eyes still glowed with pure, unfiltered joy, the kind adults often forget in the rush of living. Sophie turned to Liam. "Would you like to go out to the garden? There are string lights, fresh air, and no whispers." Liam smiled softly, his expression honest. "That sounds like paradise." They slipped through a side door into the hotel's back garden. A stone path curved between patches of grass, lit by golden strings of lights dangling like honey drops from the branches. Leo darted back and forth, chasing Firefly's cupcake, held high like some sacred treasure. "I'm not eating it yet," he declared proudly. "I'll save it for when I'm really hungry." Sophie laughed. "Then eat half now. Save the other half for when you're super-duper hungry." Liam watched the two of them, and for a heart that had taught itself to live without feeling, it was like someone had cracked a window open, letting the breeze drift in. They stopped beside a small wooden bench. Sophie slipped off her shoes, rubbed her ankle, and lifted her head to breathe in the soft night air. Liam rolled his chair closer, settling beside her. The wind stirred his hair. The lights above swayed as if breathing. "Thank you for the dance," he spoke first. His voice was low, warm, like worn velvet. Or, more accurately, for the waltz on wheels. "You don't need to thank me," Sophie replied, turning to face him, her eyes suddenly serious. "All I did was bring you back into the celebration you deserve to be part of." Her words slowed him. He looked away, the glow of the string lights brushing his cheekbones, revealing the exhaustion buried deep. "It's hard," he murmured, "when everyone looks at you like you're a tragedy." Sophie didn't interrupt. She just listened. Liam inhaled deeply. "After the accident, I became someone else in people's eyes. First it was the doctors, endless talk of years of therapy, of learning acceptance. Then my fiancée. She said, sorry. She wasn't strong enough, and she left as though staying would drown her along with me." Silence pressed in. Only distant laughter drifted from the ballroom, like echoes from another world. My friends, Liam continued. At first they sent texts like, "Let me know if you need anything." Then silence. Maybe I wasn't the guy they wanted to invite out anymore, not the man standing at the head of the table. And if I couldn't stand, they didn't know where to stand in my life either. He gave a small, weary laugh. So the rehab center became the only place I went. The smell of disinfectant, the sound of machines tugging at muscles, the same motions repeated every day, as if the world itself had shrunk into a gym with no exits. Sophie swallowed hard. In her mind, she pictured him, a man who once commanded empires, now practicing nothing more than shifting from bed to chair without falling. Then, with a voice soft but steady, she said, "You didn't give up." Liam lifted his gaze to her. The golden lights painted his face, softening the lines that had grown so hard. His eyes no longer looked cold. They seemed to be opening a door that had been locked for 2 years. "There were days I wanted to," he admitted, voice heavy like a confession. "But tonight," his eyes drifted to Leo, the boy sitting on the grass, carefully splitting the cupcake in half, tucking one piece into a napkin, savoring the other bite by bite as though it was the whole world. Liam's lips curved faintly. He continued, "Tonight I realize happiness isn't far away. It begins the moment you choose to keep moving forward instead of giving up. And because of you, I know I have a reason to keep going." Sophie laughed, her voice blooming like a flower in the night. "And I've realized even a wheelchair can be a dance partner if someone is brave enough to step out onto the floor." A gentle silence wrapped around them. Then Liam tilted his head, his tone low but teasing. "And what about you? You don't strike me as the type to ask a stranger to dance." Sophie's hands clenched, then released in her lap. "I was left behind too. Not because of an accident, but because of a phone call, right before my own wedding." Liam stopped breathing. Sophie's voice lowered steady as though pulling back the curtain on a faded page still stained with tears. "That day, the bouquet was white baby's breath. The dress I wore was borrowed from my cousin, too wide at the shoulders, too loose at the collar. But I smiled anyway. I stood behind a thin curtain, clutching the bouquet, hearing my mother whisper, 'Just smile, darling. Everything will be fine.' I believed it until his phone rang." She paused, drawing in a breath. It was his mother. I caught fragments of her voice, sharp and cold. "If you walk out there, you'll lose everything. Your job, your future, this family. Don't ruin your life for one mistake." I couldn't hear it all, but I saw his face turn pale. He hung up, walked to me, his eyes in chaos. And he said, "I'm sorry. I'm not strong enough. I'm not ready to be a husband. Not ready to be a father." Sophie's fingers tightened in her lap, her voice trembling but firm. Liam leaned forward, his storm gray eyes wide, brimming with sorrow. "At that time, you were pregnant." Sophie nodded, a short but crushing nod. "Leo." She lifted her gaze, staring at the golden string lights above, as if they mocked her like glittering stars. I walked out the back door thinking I could escape the stairs inside the hall. But I was wrong. That shame followed me everywhere, in the pity of neighbors and my parents' if-onlys, in the double shifts I worked just to afford rent. Her voice sank lower, no longer just a story, but a wound reopening right before him. She gave a faint, bitter smile. "Funny, isn't it? Tonight you sat alone at a VIP table, and I sat at a table by the door. Both of us left behind at a wedding." Liam laughed softly, a sound edged with tears. "I was the abandoned guest, and you were the abandoned bride. Some short story somewhere would call it that." Sophie shrugged lightly, her smile gentle. "If life were a movie, this would be the scene where the writer makes two main characters take shelter together under the same awning." They laughed together. And just then, a small voice piped up. "Mommy, I ate the half I saved." Leo looked up, crumbs dotting his cheeks, eyes bright. Sophie pretended to scold him, pulling out a napkin to wipe his mouth. "That's fine. When we're super duper hungry, we'll just eat the wind." "What does the wind taste like?" Leo asked, deeply thoughtful. "It's dan dik was den da mao." Without hesitation, Liam answered, "Like freedom." The three of them, each carrying wounds, fears, and fallen dreams, laughed together. In that moment, it didn't matter what tomorrow held. All that mattered was tonight, string lights, a cupcake, and each other. The night breeze stirred the tree branches, strung with golden lights, casting glittering patterns across the soft grass. The garden behind the hotel seemed wrapped in a gentle blanket, woven from the scent of jasmine and the faint laughter drifting from afar. But where Sophie and Liam sat, everything quieted, as if the world itself had hushed to honor something sacred just beginning to bloom. Sophie turned toward Liam, her fingers tracing the strap of the small purse resting on the wooden bench. Her voice lowered as if telling a story to herself. "You know, I used to hate rooms that were too brightly lit. Like the lights were exposing every flaw of mine, making me feel even smaller." Liam stayed silent, storm gray eyes fixed on her, listening. But here the string lights hang low like stars you can reach. They don't expose anyone. They shine just enough to make me feel safe, just enough to let me take another step. Liam glanced down at his hands, fingers that once clutched contracts, keyboards, and even horse reins, now trembling for reasons he couldn't yet name. He whispered, careful not to break the peace that wrapped around them. And for the first time in 2 years, I'm not afraid to go back into that ballroom, because now I know someone will look at me like a man, not like a tragedy. Sophie didn't smile. She only gave a small nod, her eyes glimmering under the golden lights. You were never a tragedy, Liam. You're someone learning to stand again. And whether it's on your feet or with your heart, that's your choice. A light wind carried the scent of wild grass and the chirping of crickets close by. From the ballroom, the MC's voice rang out, inviting guests to gather for the bouquet toss. Leo shot up like a spring. "Mommy, let's go catch the flowers for Mr. Liam." The line made Sophie nearly laugh out loud, while Liam's eyes widened in astonishment at the boy's innocent boldness. Sophie bent down, brushing Leo's hair into place. It was messy from play, but his eyes shone with the excitement of discovering some great secret. "That's a good idea," she said, smiling, "but I think Mr. Liam needs a different kind of flower." "What kind?" Leo asked eagerly, as if his pencil was ready to write down the universe's secret. Liam sat quiet for a few seconds, his eyes sliding from Sophie's face to Leo's small hands, then up to the swaying lights above. A faint smile spread across his lips, half teasing, half confessing more than he intended. "A flower you don't throw for people to fight over," he said slowly. "A flower you place into someone's hand, like a promise." The breeze stirred, making the lights sway as if in agreement. No one spoke. His words fell like a droplet onto the surface of a lake, rippling outward, leaving a hush around them. Sophie drew in a deep breath, then stood. She brushed her dress lightly, a small but decisive motion. "Let's go back," she said, her tone warm but firm. "We've stayed out here long enough." She paused briefly, as though worried her words might press against his old wounds. But Liam smiled gently, his eyes no longer running from hers. "You're right," he nodded, pushing his wheels forward softly. "Tonight, I don't plan on sitting alone." Leo ran ahead, holding up the cupcake wrapper like a tiny flag. Sophie walked beside Liam, her hand resting lightly on the armrest of his chair, not to push, only to be there. The door opened, music rushed back in. Bright, joyful. But this time, they weren't outsiders anymore. They were 3 people. Not quite a family, not yet a promise, but already a warm circle that belonged together. And this time no one would be left behind. The next morning, the little cafe on Maple Street was busier than usual. The smell of freshly roasted coffee mingled with waffles crisping on the griddle, a fragrance sweet enough to forgive even a Monday morning. Behind the counter, Sophie tightened the strings of her faded brown apron and smiled at the old regular who always ordered a low-foam latte. She had worked this part-time job for 2 years, just enough to cover rent, just enough to keep her smile. The door swung open. A flower delivery man entered his arms, nearly hidden behind a massive bouquet. Red roses intertwined with white baby's breath, wrapped in rustic craft paper. "For Miss Sophie Allen," he announced. The cafe fell silent. Sophie's eyes widened, her heart pounding as if keeping tempo for an unwritten love song. She accepted the bouquet, hands trembling slightly. Nestled inside was a small card with just one line written on the front. "The man you once asked to dance." A laugh bubbled out of Sophie, her pulse skipping. But when she turned the card over, she froze for a moment. On the back was a phone number, and beneath it a quiet line written like a whispered invitation. "Are you free tonight?" Leo darted over from the corner table. "Mommy, it's the man in the wheelchair, right? I knew it, I told you." The cafe erupted with laughter. Sophie quickly set the flowers on the counter and ruffled her son's hair. "Leo, shh. Not so loud." But inside her, something had bloomed. Not loud, not overwhelming, just a warmth spreading through her chest. She had forgotten how sweet it felt to be remembered, until today. And somewhere deep in her heart, Sophie hoped. This wouldn't just be a single dance. That evening, as sunlight slipped away from the cafe's windows, Sophie still couldn't take her eyes off the bouquet resting quietly on the counter. The crimson roses glowed like a beating heart, while sprigs of baby's breath whispered softly between them. In silence they spoke to her, He remembers. Her coworker finally leaned closer, unable to contain the curiosity any longer. Through the steam of coffee, she whispered, "Are you going tonight, with him?" Sophie blushed, as if her heart had just been named aloud in front of a crowd. She couldn't hide her shy smile, though her eyes glimmered like a night lit by a secret moon. After her shift ended, Sophie sat in her car for a few minutes, the bouquet still on the seat beside her, the phone in her hand. The small note with his number was still tucked safely in her pocket. Simple, discreet, yet brimming with hope. After a breath of hesitation, she typed quickly, "I'm free tonight. Where would you like to go, Mr. Whitaker?" The reply came within seconds, as though he had been waiting all afternoon. "Somewhere no one tramples on roses. I'll pick you up at 7. Sophie laughed, leaning her head back against the seat, hugging the bouquet to her chest, like a sweet secret too precious to share. Liam's wheelchair rolled to a stop in front of a small riverside restaurant. No chandeliers, no paparazzi flashes, just candlelight flickering on wooden tables and the soft strum of guitar floating in the scent of pizza browning in a stone oven. It was a place simple enough to breathe, quiet enough to let hearts open. When Sophie stepped inside, Liam was already waiting, dressed in a navy suit, his smile calm and welcoming. The candlelight mirrored in his eyes, no longer shadowed but serene, like someone who had weathered storms and learned to rest in the stillness after. Sophie sat down, returning his smile. "You're early." Liam shrugged, a faint sparkle in his eyes. "Habit of a control freak, but it seems I've been out of control since the night you asked me to dance." Sophie laughed, tilting her head. "That was fast. Your first confession before we've even started dinner." Feigning composure, Liam lifted his glass. "Think of this as an after-hours meeting, with a very special partner." Sophie winked the candlelight, catching her playful smile. "In that case, I should be sending you an invoice for consultation." Liam nearly choked on his wine, and for the first time the famously composed CEO looked flustered. Sophie laughed so hard she had to steady herself on the table. The air grew lighter, filled with laughter, and the small fragments of something new being born. Between them, Leo sat wide-eyed as if evaluating a major contract. He flipped open the menu, his little finger pointing straight to a line. "Mommy looks spaghetti with meatballs. I want that, and Mr. Liam should order pizza. Pizza's easier to cut." Sophie chuckled, tilting her head teasingly. "So, are you managing his dinner now?" Leo shook his head, his serious expression making them both laugh. "No, I'm the matchmaker. If you order the same food, you'll get along better. Then, you'll like each other more." Liam froze, coughing lightly while Sophie's cheeks turned red. She opened her mouth to scold him gently, but her eyes betrayed her, meeting Liam's, and both of them broke into laughter, hearts thumping faster than they cared to admit. When the waiter approached, Sophie started to order her usual lasagna, but then, catching Leo's hopeful look, she smiled instead. "I'll have the small seafood pizza." Leo smacked the table in triumph. "See, I told you. If you both eat pizza, it means you're perfect together." The waiter turned to Liam. His storm gray eyes glimmered with both amusement and surrender. "Then, make it 2 of those." Sophie's cheeks flushed under the candlelight. Liam fiddled with his napkin, but the corner of his mouth betrayed a smile. Leo leaned back, folding his arms like a little broker who had just closed a deal. There, first dinner, success. All 3 of them laughed. But within her laughter, Sophie felt her heart skip to a new rhythm. The rhythm of beginnings, all from a single pizza. Liam looked at her, no longer seeing a weary single mother, but a woman glowing with kind eyes and a heart that truly listened. Later, as they shared the final spoonful of tiramisu, Liam's gaze softened. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice low and sincere. "I'd forgotten. How good it feels to truly talk with someone." Sophie's eyes shone warmly in the candlelight. "And I'd forgotten. How good it feels to be remembered." All it took was one bouquet. Silence settled, not awkward, but like a veil of mist that made everything clearer. Leo yawned, rubbing his eyes, but murmured sleepily, "Mr. Liam, you laughed more today than yesterday." Sophie blinked, caught between surprise and tenderness. Liam looked down, his eyes locking with hers, as though confessing something without words. Leo sat up straighter, determined. "That's because of Mommy. She always makes people happy, even when they're sad." The air held still for a heartbeat. Sophie turned her face away, but the glow in her eyes betrayed her. Dinner ended, and the door opened to reveal the city glittering with nightlights, the river breeze brushing their hair, whispering of new things to come. Before parting, Liam leaned close, his voice meant only for her. "If you'd like, I could send you flowers every day." Sophie's eyes widened, shimmering with unshed emotion. "No one's ever said that to me before." Liam smiled, this time without his usual mask, warm and unguarded. "Then let me be the first." And in that moment, for the first time in years, Sophie didn't feel like just a single mother bracing against life. She felt like a woman again, seen, cherished, and perhaps loved. In the weeks following their pizza dinner, Liam's life began to change quietly. His calendar, once filled only with meetings and reports, now made room for simple things. An afternoon walk in the park, a casual dinner in Sophie's small apartment, or evenings filled with laughter thanks to Leo's silly jokes. 2 months passed, and slowly Sophie and Leo were no longer just visitors in Liam's life. They had become essential. One May afternoon, sunlight poured warmly across the park's grass. Leo pedaled his small red bike in circles, a superhero cape tied around his shoulders, flapping wildly in the breeze. Sophie sat on a wooden bench, paper cup of coffee in hand, eyes following her son. Beside her, Liam's wheelchair was parked close. He watched Leo too, the corner of his lips lifting into one of those rare smiles. He told her about the old days, how he used to ride horses, leaping over obstacles, winning competitions in the circles of the elite. "I used to be a pretty good rider," he said, voice low and tinged with nostalgia. Leo overheard, braked his little bike suddenly and shouted, "Mr. Liam, do horses have brakes?" The innocent question made Sophie nearly choke on her coffee. Liam burst out laughing, a free booming laugh so full it startled a few birds into flight. Sophie looked at him, her heart softening unexpectedly. For the first time she saw him laugh without restraint, without walls, without pain. On other evenings, Liam would stop by Sophie's tiny apartment. The home was small but warm, full of the smell of simple meals and the sound of cartoons from the old TV. Leo would tug him toward the sofa and shove a comic book into his hands. "Read this one? And you have to do the villain's voice." Liam raised a brow, then threw himself into the role with such seriousness, it was ridiculous. His deep, raspy voice rumbled with mock menace, sending Leo into peals of uncontrollable laughter. From the kitchen sink, Sophie washed dishes, sneaking glances at the two of them in the golden light. The sight pierced her chest in the sweetest way. For a fleeting second, they looked like a real family. Weekends, the three of them shopped together. Leo trotted ahead. Sophie pushed the cart, and Liam wheeled along behind. At the frozen aisle, Sophie asked pizza or spaghetti. Both Liam and Leo answered at once pizza, then laughed together. Sophie shook her head, tossing both into the cart. While she picked vegetables, Leo slipped in a tub of chocolate ice cream. Liam saw it, but pretended not to. When Sophie turned back, he simply said with a straight face, "I think the house could use a little more sweetness." Sophie widened her eyes, then burst out laughing. That exact moment was captured by a paparazzo, a man in a wheelchair smiling gently, a woman leaning down, laughing beside him, and a boy hugging a tub of ice cream like treasure. It was an ordinary scene, simple, yet too beautiful not to make the news. One afternoon, Liam surprised Sophie at the cafe where she worked part-time. His tailored suit clashed sharply with her worn brown apron. Among the whir of blenders and the scent of roasted beans, he sat by the window, drawing every glance in the shop. Sophie's co-workers whispered behind her, "Oh my God, isn't that Liam Whitaker?" But Liam didn't care. He just sat there, eyes lighting up, when Sophie brought him his coffee. "This is the first time I've waited this long for a latte," he teased. Sophie set the cup down, tilting her head. Some things are worth waiting for. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath. One night, Leo came down with a fever. Sophie panicked, fumbling for the doctor's number. Before she could dial, Liam arrived, with medicine and rice porridge he'd asked his chef to prepare. He sat at the bedside, pressing a cool cloth to Leo's forehead. Half asleep, Leo opened his eyes and whispered, "Mr. Liam, you're like my superhero dad." Sophie turned away, hiding the tears brimming in her eyes. But Liam's heart clenched, not from burden, but from the sheer weight of being called that for the very first time. And so, 2 months passed in moments that seemed ordinary. Park strolls, dinners in a small apartment, laughter in the grocery aisles, quiet glances over coffee, No chandeliers, no fireworks, no grand gowns. Just three people slowly forming a warm circle that shielded each other from the world. Sophie no longer felt alone. Leo no longer asked why their home had only two people. And Liam, the man who once thought his life was over, began to open his heart to a new beginning. And then one July morning, everything shattered. The phone buzzed on Liam's nightstand. The caller ID showed James, his assistant and the gatekeeper of his carefully controlled public life. Mr. Whitaker, James's voice was tight, urgent. The press. This morning. They published it. Liam reached for his phone. On the front page was a photo snapped at the supermarket. Sophie laughing, Leo hugging a tub of ice cream, and him in his wheelchair. His eyes softened in a way few had ever seen. The caption blared in bold letters. Wheelchair. Billionaire's secret family. Single mother seduces and captures his heart. Liam's body locked up. His grip tightened on the armrest. His heart thudded, not from shock, but from recognition. He had known this day would come. Even the smallest happiness gets turned into a joke, he muttered, voice hoarse. That entire day, Liam spiraled into a world he knew too well. The one where old wounds were ripped open and laid bare across headlines. Everything he feared came alive again. The pitying looks, the whispers, the cruel assumptions about weakness. Worse this time, he wasn't alone. Sophie and Leo, the only two who had made him feel like a man again, had been dragged into the storm with him. That afternoon, Sophie called. Her voice was gentle like the first summer rain, warm but cautious. Would you like to take a walk with us tonight? Liam bit down on his lip, staring out at the foggy city skyline. Tonight I'm busy. Maybe another time. Just a short answer. But Sophie heard it clearly. The distance, the retreat, the familiar ache of being pushed aside. It stirred memories of all the times she'd been left behind by her fiancé, by her family, even by herself, on nights she could barely keep going. She stayed silent for a few seconds, then inhaled, replying softly, her voice steady, even though her heart cracked. All right, whenever you feel ready. That night, Sophie couldn't sit still. Leo fell asleep early, clutching his superhero pillow, mumbling even in dreams, "Mommy and Mr. Liam are perfect together." Sophie kissed his forehead, then called the neighbor to watch him. She hailed a cab straight to Liam's building. She wasn't waiting for an invitation. She wasn't afraid of rejection. She just knew she refused to be left outside someone's life again. The door opened. Liam sat by the window, his wheelchair an extension of him, now a sight both familiar and heartbreaking. His expression flickered with surprise at seeing her, then quickly hardened into a guarded frown. "You shouldn't have come," he said curtly. "Then where should I be?" Sophie crossed her arms, her gaze unflinching. Sitting at the cafe, reading trash tabloids, pretending to believe them. Liam turned away, shoulders rigid. "You don't understand. The media can crush someone. I've lived through it, but you and Leo haven't. I can't let you both get dragged into that mud." Sophie stepped closer, each stride tearing down the walls he tried to raise. "Do you think I'm that fragile? My fiancé abandoned me before my wedding, and I survived. For 6 years, I've been both mother and father to Leo. You think a few newspapers are going to scare me?" Liam's jaw tightened, his storm gray eyes torn. "They'll say you pity me, that you're here for the money, or worse, that you chose me because my chair makes me some spectacle." Sophie stood still, letting the silence speak her pain. Then she stepped closer again, her eyes glassy but blazing with fire. "Do you honestly believe I chose you out of pity?" Liam couldn't answer. "Listen carefully, Liam Whitaker," Sophie said, her voice shaking, but every word firm. "I chose you because you make me laugh, because you make me feel like I matter, because when I'm with you, I'm not just a single mom struggling to get by. I'm a woman again, and you're a man. Whole strong and, God help me, so lovable that sometimes I have to look away just to hide my blush." Liam's eyes wavered. Inside him, the ghost of Olivia walking away began to fade, replaced by this woman who refused to turn her back, who only came closer, no matter the cost. His voice broke ragged as though pulled from deep within. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everyone leaves. Friends, lovers, even myself. I'm terrified that if I let you in, you'll leave me too. Sophie stepped right up to him, laying her hand over his, gentle but firm. "I'm not them. I won't leave, unless you push me away yourself." Liam stared at her for so long, Sophie thought her heart might stop. Then he whispered like a man who'd finally glimpsed light after years in darkness. "I'm scared of losing you before I ever really have you." Sophie squeezed his hand tighter. "Then don't lose me." A tear slid down Liam's cheek. He turned away, but she saw, not weakness, but the first time he let someone touch the rawest part of him. They sat together in silence. The city outside roared, but inside that apartment, two people who thought themselves broken found something patched together by trust. And for the first time in 2 years, Liam believed this truth. Loving someone means letting them stay, even when you're tempted to let go. From high above, the city looked like a maze of light. Gold, red, and green streaks spilling along the avenues like restless stars scattered across the night. But Liam no longer felt lost in that maze. Not with Sophie beside him, the woman with eyes as gentle as street lamps guiding his way, and courage folded into her heart like a secret map. They sat together for a long while, not needing words. Some silences weren't frightening at all. They were sacred, like unspoken vows. Outside the window, the wind brushed against the building, whispering of a new day that was close at hand. And that new day came, not with sunlight, but with a warning in the boardroom the next morning. Inside, Blackwood Capital's boardroom, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn bowstring. On the giant screen, headlines scrolled across a tabloid site: "Wheelchair Billionaire's Secret Family." Mr. Parker, a veteran shareholder, spoke coldly. "Mr. Whitaker, the Morimoto Group in Japan, has seen these reports. They fear your personal image could damage the firm's credibility. They are not alone. The rest of us also need answers." A younger shareholder added hesitantly, "Forgive me, but this deal is our entry point into Asia. Morimoto wants direct assurances from you, not through reports or your assistant. They need to see you're still in control." The words landed like weights. Liam's grip tightened on the armrest. He knew his mind was sharp, his leadership intact, but the outside world only saw stolen, candid shots. James, his assistant, stepped in quickly. "The Morimoto delegation is in New York. They've agreed to a private dinner. It's the final chance." Every eye turned to Liam. One chance to keep his position as leader or lose everything. He lifted his head, his voice deep and decisive. "I'll meet them." The car glided slowly along the riverside road, city lights shimmering across the glass. Inside, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the hum of the engine. James glanced back from the front seat. "Mr. Whitaker, I know this isn't protocol, but Morimoto values sincerity more than numbers. They need to see not only a CEO, but a man." Liam frowned. "And what do you mean by that?" James flicked a look towards Sophie, then back. "Ms. Allen can help ease the atmosphere. The Japanese appreciate balance and humanity in negotiation, and frankly, she makes you seem less like a lone warrior." Sophie laughed softly, half shy, half teasing. "Sounds like I'm just a PR tactic. I thought you only wanted me to sit still and look pleasant." James shrugged. Sometimes the right smile is worth more than a 100-page report. Liam turned to Sophie. In the dim light, she adjusted the strap of her purse hair falling loose around her face. Part of him wanted to object to shield her from the storm, but another part knew James was right. "I don't want you under this kind of pressure," Liam murmured. Sophie tilted her head, her smile gentle yet unwavering. "Yawin Staunis or pressure? I'm used to it, but if my being there helps you breathe easier, then I want to go." In that instant, Liam no longer felt like he was heading into battle. He felt like he was going to dinner with someone walking beside him. The Riverside Japanese restaurant was serene and elegant, with paper lanterns, bamboo screens, and the faint fragrance of green tea lingering in the air. It wasn't a place to flaunt power. It was a place to test truth. Liam entered with Sophie, who wore a simple cream dress. Unassuming, but graceful. Not glamorous, not glittering. Yet, in Liam's eyes, she was the brightest soul in the room. Sophie leaned over and whispered with a grin, "I only came for the sushi. But if saving a corporation happens along the way, that's just a bonus." Liam chuckled, for the first time all day. At the head of the table sat Mr. Morimoto, posture straight as a pen, his expression still as a calm lake. Beside him was his wife, kind-eyed, but equally sharp. The conversation began stiff Liam, presenting numbers, vision, strategies, with the Polish that once commanded the respect of investors worldwide. But Mr. Morimoto's face never softened. His eyes flicked between Liam and the chair beneath him. Not obvious, but enough. Sophie noticed, and when the sashimi arrived, she deliberately let a slice slip into her soy sauce dish, splattering droplets across the plate. Oh no. She laughed, dabbing her fingers with the napkin. I've practiced all week, but I still managed to turn sushi into soup. A brief pause, then the unexpected. Mrs. Morimoto covered her mouth, giggling. Mr. Morimoto turned to his wife, his expression easing. In Japan, he said, voice gentler than before, we believe it takes a lifetime to truly master chopsticks. You're still young. You have plenty of time. Laughter rippled across the table. It was no longer an examination. It was simply dinner, shared between people. Sophie smiled, adding lightly, I may be clumsy with chopsticks, but I know how to choose who to trust. The man beside me protects what's precious, with both heart and vision. Her words weren't printed on paper, but they hung in the air, a truth no report could capture. Trust. Mrs. Morimoto leaned toward her husband, whispering something. He nodded slowly. Liam seized the moment, continuing his presentation. But this time, Morimoto's eyes didn't linger on the wheels of the chair. They rested on the man, passionate, steady, unbowed. When the final cup of tea was poured, Mr. Morimoto spoke, deliberate and firm. Blackwood Capital has a leader who listens, and a companion who inspires confidence. I believe we can sign. Liam stayed silent for a long moment, then bowed deeply, his voice resonant with gratitude. Arigatou gozaimasu. On the way back, the city lights shimmered along the river, glowing like warm whispers of the night. Sophie sat beside him in the car, her hand resting lightly on his armrest. Not to guide, just to touch. A wordless thank you. You know, Liam said softly, his voice low, almost shy. Tonight you didn't just save a company. Sophie tilted her head, lips curving playfully. I think all I did was drop sashimi, and somehow that counts as strategy. Liam laughed, a sound slipping out like wind through an open window. His shoulders eased for the first time all week. He turned to her. This time his gaze wasn't only grateful, it was admiring mixed with something deeper he was only just beginning to recognize. And in that moment, clear as light on water, Liam understood. She didn't just make him smile, she gave him a reason to stand strong again. Not in the old way, but in their way. The physical therapy room blazed with fluorescent light, bouncing off polished wooden floors and the parallel bars that stretched ahead like a challenge waiting to be conquered. The sharp scent of antiseptic mingled with the cool sting of menthol from muscle rubs, forming an aroma both intimidating and familiar. Liam Whitaker sat on the edge of his wheelchair, sweat already beading on his brow, though he hadn't moved yet. His hands clamped onto the armrests, knuckles pale. In front of him, the parallel bars seemed to stretch endlessly, and at the far end lay something simple, but for him, revolutionary to stand. Beside him, Mr. Harris. His therapist stood watchful. His hands hovered nearby, stern yet patient, the way only someone who had seen countless failures turn into triumphs could be. Today we try standing, no steps, just standing. Harris said, his voice steady as a drumbeat inside Liam's chest. Liam nodded, avoiding his gaze. His eyes fixed ahead, as if looking into Harris's face might weaken his resolve. From the corner of the room, Sophie stood quietly, her fingers gripping the strap of her purse, her heart pounding like an orchestra of hope and fear. Since the day she met him, she had seen those eyes. Once filled with wounded pride, the eyes of a man who had commanded the world and now had to learn to rise one step at a time. Ready, Harris asked, calm but unyielding. 3, 2, 1. Liam braced, muscles straining as his hands clamped onto the bars. His arms trembled, pulling his body upward. Veins stood out on his forearms, his face flushed, drops of sweat falling to the floor. He pushed harder, chasing the ghost of a memory. The days when standing came as easily as breathing. His numb legs flared with sharp pain, like nerves sparking to life again. They trembled, then collapsed. A harsh thud echoed as his knees hit the floor. Harris lunged forward, but Sophie was faster. She knelt, arms wrapping around him before he could bury his face in shame. Enough! Liam roared, his voice breaking like shattering glass. I can't do it. I'm nothing. Just a man chained to this chair. Every effort is pointless. No one answered. Only the sound of his ragged breaths and the wheels clattering against the floor filled the silence. Sophie held him tighter, her breath mingling with the salty sting of sweat, the cold bite of steel, the raw ache of his tears. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute, "even if you sit in that chair for the rest of your life, I'll still be here. I don't love your legs. I love you." His body froze, and then for the first time in years, tears spilled freely, soaking her shoulder, tangling in her hair, washing away every carefully built wall. "But if you want to stand," Sophie continued, pressing her forehead gently against his, "then I'll stand with you. If you fall, if it hurts, I won't let you face it alone." Harris stepped back quietly, leaving the room to them. Sophie's voice quivered like a fragile night breeze. "You don't need to be perfect, Liam. You only need to be yourself. And if you're too tired, then let me be the legs you lean on." Liam gave a shaky laugh, though it cracked with sobs. "You're absolutely crazy." "Yeah," Sophie smiled through her tears. "The right kind of crazy. And I'm not leaving." Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't cold. Liam rested his head on her shoulder, surrendering his armor for the first time. No strength, no mask, no defenses. Just a man leaning and knowing he wasn't alone anymore. A week later, the VIP gala at the Metropole Hotel glowed with golden chrysanthemums and pale blue hydrangeas, flowers symbolizing gratitude and trust. White linens covered tables, glassware sparkled beneath the chandeliers. At the table closest to the stage, Leo sat upright in his tiny suit legs, swinging under the chair, his eyes wide as though he'd wandered into a fairy tale castle. "Mommy," he whispered, "this looks just like the weddings in movies. Do I have to bow to people?" Sophie laughed, straightening his little tie. "No, sweetheart. Your smile is the best bow there is." From across the ballroom, Liam appeared. His gaze still carried traces of nerves, but his shoulders no longer hunched under the weight of expectation. And when he spotted Sophie and Leo, the tension slipped away like dust, shaken from a long-forgotten mirror. "You're here," he murmured when he reached them, his words brushing against her like a gentle hand. Of course, Sophie smiled, her eyes steady. "Tonight is your night." The stage lights blazed. Conversations hushed, giving way to solemn silence. Liam rolled forward, no crutches, no helping hands. Just him, his wheelchair, and eyes filled with quiet authority. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice deep and steady. "There was a time I believed that when my legs gave out, I had nothing left to give. But tonight I understand. We always have something to offer. Our hearts, our minds, our faith in one another." The hall stilled, then erupted in applause. Just then Leo bolted onto the stage. He grabbed Liam's hand and with proud clarity spoke into the microphone. "I'm Leo. Tonight I came with my mom and my family." The room froze. Then, as if someone had pressed a hidden button, emotion surged and spilled over. Sophie jumped up, face flushing, ready to pull him back. But Liam lifted a hand, stopping her. He didn't hide. He didn't flinch. He held Leo's hand tighter, then looked straight at Sophie. "Family," he said, his voice ringing to the farthest corners, "isn't always written in blood. Sometimes it's a choice. And tonight I choose her. And this boy." The ballroom rose to its feet. Applause thundered like a storm. Tears were wiped quickly, but no one could hide the swell in their hearts. In the front row, Mrs. Morimoto leaned toward her husband, smiling in approval. And as the stage lights captured the scene, a man in a wheelchair holding the hands of a simple woman and a boy beaming with belief, no one saw a disability. They saw completeness. That night, the little cafe on Maple Street glowed with an unusual warmth. Golden lights hung low, soft as moonlight caught inside jars. Wooden chairs had been pushed aside, leaving an open space in the center, not for crowds to squeeze into, but for something unlisted on the menu, something priceless love freshly brewed. On the bar counter, voses overflowed with white baby's breath and crimson roses arranged into an arch that perfumed the air like the sigh of someone waiting with a full heart. And right as the clock struck 7, the cafe doors swung open. Sophie entered wearing a simple pale blue dress. Her brown hair was pinned up, a few soft strands falling across her forehead. She had just come from her shift at the bookstore. No lipstick, no polished accessories, But when her eyes found the man waiting in the center of the room, none of that mattered. Liam sat there in a sharp black suit, a bouquet of fresh flowers in hand. He was no longer the icy CEO, no longer the man whispered about behind his back. He was simply the man Sophie loved, and tonight, he was here for her. When their eyes met, time seemed to catch in the space between their glances. Liam wheeled forward until he was close enough to hear her heartbeat. He lifted the bouquet, his voice husky with emotion. "The last time you asked me to dance at a wedding, tonight, let me ask you to be my partner for life." The cafe fell silent, a pause so long it felt as though the entire city held its breath waiting. Sophie stood frozen, her vision blurring with tears, not from shock, but from a tidal wave of emotion rising from the deepest part of her, from the place that had once been abandoned and branded not enough. Her voice cracked, spilling out in fragments. "Are you sure?" Liam nodded, slow but unwavering. "I don't know how far I'll walk, but I know this. I want to spend the rest of the journey with you. And with Leo." Sophie broke into sobs, nodding over and over before she could even form the word yes. She bent down and wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. The cafe erupted in applause. Friends, co-workers, even James, who once measured his life in charts and numbers, wiped at damp eyes. Leo dashed forward, shouting with all the joy in his small body. "Finally, I have a dad." Laughter filled the cafe, the kind of laughter born from truth. A month later, church bells rang out like heaven's own blessing. Sunlight poured through stained glass, painting the old stone floor with streaks of color and faith. Sophie walked down the aisle in a plain white gown. No sequins, no plunging back, but it was the most beautiful dress she'd ever worn. Because this time, she wore it for herself. Each step was sprinkled with falling white petals, soft as whispered prayers from the universe. And at the end of the aisle, Liam waited. The same wheelchair, the same tailored black suit. But his eyes, oh his eyes, blazed as if every dark day had existed only to bring him here to this exact moment. They looked at each other, and words were unnecessary. Everything they needed was already there. In their gaze and their laughter, in the memory of Sophie falling into his arms and him leaning on her shoulder. "Liam Whitaker, do you promise to love and cherish Sophie Allen in wealth and in want, in health and in sickness? Until the end of your days," the priest asked. Liam looked at Sophie, his hand tightening on the armrest. "I do. And Sophie Allen, do you promise?" "I do," Sophie cut in, her eyes sparkling. "I absolutely do." The church burst into cheers, music, applause, even muffled sobs. And when the priest finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Liam didn't lean forward right away. Instead, he placed his hands firmly on the bars of his chair, inhaled deeply. Then, slowly, determinedly, he rose. James rushed to hand him a crutch. Liam steadied himself, legs trembling but unbroken. And in that hushed second, he stood, face to face with Sophie, eye to eye, as though the 2 missing years had vanished. He leaned closer, his voice low, meant for her alone. "Remember this. Today isn't just our wedding. It's the day your husband stood up to kiss you." Then he bent down and kissed her. A kiss not polished, not rehearsed, but raw and real, as if carved into their hearts. Leo shot up from his seat, his eyes blazing with pride. "Daddy's standing. Daddy's my superhero." The church erupted, applause thundering like invisible fireworks as golden sunlight streamed down in brilliant floods. And right there in the very place where his story of loss had once begun, they wrote a new beginning, not with perfect steps, but with love strong enough to lift all 3 of them to their feet. At the reception, lights and music swirled around them. On the dance floor, Liam still needed his crutch, but Sophie clasped one hand. Leo clasped the other, and together they swayed. Not perfectly, not in sync, but completely. Sophie whispered against his shoulder. "Do you remember the night I pulled you into that party?" Liam smiled, squeezing her hand. "Of course. And from that night on, I knew I'd never leave the dance floor again." Leo looked up, his voice clear and bright. "Because we're a team, right?" Liam lowered his gaze to the little head leaning against him, then lifted it to Sophie's shining eyes. His voice was deep, steady. "Not just a team, we're a family, forever." Outside, fireworks exploded. Inside, 3 broken hearts had been mended, bound together by love, by trust, and by hands that refused to let go. The following spring, in a small riverside home, shaded by wisteria that bloomed every May, the three of them lived simply, just as they had found each other. No noise, no grandeur, only countless small things that made happiness whole. Sophie opened her own cafe where every cappuccino came with a dusting of cocoa shaped like a heart. Not because customers asked, but because Leo once said, "That way everyone who drinks it feels loved." Sometimes Liam worked there, laptop on his knees, coffee in hand, his free palm always reaching to catch Sophie's when she passed. He still used the wheelchair most of the time, but every morning he practiced standing, not to prove anything but to remind himself even after falling, he chose to rise. For them. Leo now knew how to tie his shoes. He even wrote a school essay titled "My Hero," bringing tears to his teacher's eyes. It was about his dad, the man who taught him that standing isn't just about legs, but about a heart that refuses to give up. On calm evenings, they sat under the wisteria vines listening to the wind sing through the leaves. Sophie leaned against Liam's shoulder, Leo asleep in her lap, clutching his unfinished comic. And in those moments, no fireworks, no spotlight, Liam knew true happiness wasn't about standing tall. It was about having a hand to hold when you stumbled. And he had found those hands, forever. In Sophie, in Leo, in the second life he had been given.